everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar. Today we'll be discussing the issue concerning parenting legal issues during the lockdown. Basically, with the lockdown, a lot of changes have come about, challenges, and obviously there were legal issues on board. With me today is Ayesha Karim, an attorney from Durban. She specializes in family law matters. Both me and her have been well involved in these type of issues that came about during lockdown. And it's funny, I got to know her because of lockdown, the challenges that we face and so on. So Aisha, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I think that a lot of good has come from the lockdown. One of it has been our relationship, which has grown, and yeah, trying to navigate our way through these unprecedented times.
No, wonderful, Aisha, and I appreciated that there are many that they aren't. Okay, what I'm picking up is many law firms have closed their doors, unfortunately, because of the lockdown. And like yourself, you're still relevant, you're still there, and you're still fighting the fight. Although fighting the fight is harder now because you have to fight against the legal system itself. Many courts do not want to listen to matters. They make it extremely hard for you. But you have been a pillar in that. You've fought for your clients, notwithstanding.
I have. I think it's been, I think that the one of the toughest challenges for legal practitioners, and you're correct in saying many have closed their doors, is because, and you would know this, and some of our listeners might be aware of this, but in every province we have the High Court, of course, the High Courts. There may be more than one. Durban, KZN has two. We have Pietermaritzburg and Durban. And then we have various other family courts. So you have the Pietermaritzburg Family Court, you have the Durban, there's even one in Wentworth, Chatsworth, there's all these little courts along the way. And what I've found and what I've experienced is that regardless of what the regulations are saying, the courts are sort of doing their own thing. And I understand that to a certain degree. I mean, Durban may have infrastructure that can allow for social distancing, where matters can still be heard. We may have enough courtrooms, we may have enough, staff available that the matters can run quite smoothly. Whereas a smaller court like Wentworth or Chatsworth courts, they may not have that infrastructure, and so the matters are just going completely dead in those types of courts. So I think the biggest challenge as a practitioner was trying to navigate your way through the different courts, because obviously it would depend, where the children reside is which court would have jurisdiction over the matter. So that's been a tough one, and I've tried my best to try and get pushed through. So if the matter can't be heard, and there's been times I've rocked up at court and with my client and we're ready to go, and they keep us standing outside, and it's just adjourned. You don't even appear in court. And what I've noticed is a lot of members of the public become very despondent. They don't want to, they kind of give up on the system, which is already flawed. It was flawed before COVID and before our regulations. And this then kind of just, they feel like, this is it. I'm not prepared to do it anymore. And what I found in a lot of my successes is to keep going at it. Eventually, they have to hear your matter, right? Whether it's now or it's adjourned, you got to just keep going for it. And believe me, eventually, I've had matters during, this, since level 5 all the way down. We have had, matters been taken all the way to hearing, to oppose, arguments, etc. So yeah, that's it.
No, Aisha, I'm with you regarding that, and obviously in Cape Town is no exception. You do not know how the rules play, because any legal practitioner, you will look at the procedures, the Criminal Procedure Act, you'll look at the rules of the High Court, the Magistrate Court rules, and so on, and you'll know how to deal with the matter. But with lockdown, it has been a great challenge because each court has their own operations, and some courts have greater priority. I would imagine more in the poorer areas with respect to everyone. They might deal with more domestic violence and maintenance matters, where in the more affluent areas they'll deal more with commercial matters. But on that note, my concern is the backlog, Aisha. What happens after this? When before lockdown, trials you had to wait about 6 months to a year for a trial. Many trials has not happened for the last year. Does it mean that we have to wait now a year and a half should lockdown come to an end soon? So that's my concern. So
yeah,
Aisha,
listen, and that's a big one. What I noticed as well, I had just on the point of adjournments is a lot of the matters that were set down during the various, levels of lockdown, when they could not be heard, a lot of them were adjourned, but without a date, what we call adjourned sine die, meaning just adjourned. Now, the difficulty with that is, how do we get those matters back on the roll, to an actual date, and then serve, because we have to reserve those applications on, on the various respondents. So, that's been a big challenge as well. And it goes to your question of when does this end? I think it's really prolonged the entire process just by virtue of the fact that a lot of the matters can't be heard, unfortunately.
So I'll conclude on this point and maybe give my 2 cents. I honestly believe in retrospect that a lot of cases could have proceeded last year. They did not have to, by default adjourn. Even matters that could have been resolved in 2 minutes because he wanted an order by agreement. They just postponed. Criminal matters where the guy wants to plead
Correct,
guilty.
100%.
The guy is willing to plead guilty. They still postponed it. There's 100 people
Yeah,
outside the door.
yeah,
We're postponing each one of them, and that's
yeah.
my concern. So Aisha,
Mhm.
today's topic, parenting legal issues during the lockdown. We've discussed the general scenario and so on. Maybe we can discuss what do parents do now. This is my scenario. School holidays, in terms of a normal consent paper, would be 50-50. So usually they'll swap the kids by December time, and maintenance would be payable on a monthly basis, considering that there's a December holiday and so on. Now we have a scenario where school holidays are now extended by almost a month, extremely long,
Mm.
and that affects the maintenance aspect as well. Maybe a comment on your side. Are you with me on that?
Well, here's the thing, right? Is that, and I feel like this is where a lot of the stuff kind of goes lopsided, is people don't want to be practical about these things. There seems to be and you would know this, in this particular area of law, there's a lot of emotion attached to it. When we're dealing with business matters and commercial contracts, people will be willing to walk away from millions just for the sake of settlement. Whereas here we fight over 200 and 300 rand because I can and I want to, and nobody wants to be reasonable and deal with it in a holistic way. So yes, I think there's two sides of this. One is the aspect of access, and I've seen a lot of parents doing the 1 week, and I'm going to just quickly touch on that for a second. I'm not sure if this has been happening in Cape Town, but I've experienced this, and I've spoken to a few colleagues who have experienced this. I'm not sure if it's only Durban courts who are steering towards this kind of contact, which was never done in the past, of when I say joint care, I mean that the children would spend 1 week with mum and 1 week with dad. And I have courts who have, granted judgments of this type, which was never done before. Prior to this, we have to have the children residing at one address and then the other parent exercising their contact in terms of the Children's Act. Of late, I have seen very different things happen in court, things that I've never seen before. I had a colleague who's been in practice for 30 years, and he said to me last week he had two matters, with similar things happening last year. So I think even the courts themselves are seeing that, things have to change. We have to adjust our way. Our new normal is going to adjust. Now, in those circumstances, if the child really is spending 1 week with mom and 1 week with dad, then definitely there's going to be a change in the maintenance obligations. And I'm going to very quickly, before I know you probably have lots to add in, but when I say some stuff is invariable. For example, rent. The landlord's not going to discount your rent because your child's not there for half the month. Your rent is your rent. Your bond is your bond. Those things are not going to change. But perhaps your electricity may be slightly less. Perhaps you wouldn't need a domestic worker every day, or when the children are not there, because children make a lot of mess. So there's certain things that can be adjusted, like I said, within reason, and there's certain things you need to understand that it's never going to be adjusted because those are invariables.
And the challenge we have is those certain variables when it comes to child maintenance, the money aspect, Aisha. That is a
Yeah.
sticky topic because the father knows that he has to pay, for example, 1,000 per month, but the reality is kids are using more toilet paper, they're flushing the water more, they're more online, they're using more electricity, they're eating more. And
Eating.
they're eating a lot, and your mother yourself, I mean, you know that.
Yeah.
But Aisha, but going beyond that, access to justice. What does a parent do? You approach the maintenance court maybe for assistance. I'm not saying this is the realities which you are dealing here with, the legal issues. You approach a maintenance court, the
Mm.
father is paying in terms of the maintenance order. We have COVID-19.
Mm.
Would the court entertain this matter? In my view, they would say, no, ma'am, they'll delay it.
Correct. No, and also the reality of it is by the time it would be an application for substitution or increase depending who's applying for this. But obviously by the time that matter even gets heard, your reason for dispute might have passed. So for example, the kids, believe it or not, despite there being a disruption in the school curriculum and things moving online, etc., I must commend the schools and teachers. They've really tried to get these kids back at school. My children go to a private school, and towards the latter part of last year, my kids were back at school. They were on site. So I think the difficulty is this off and on button that seems to be, and now we're all back online again. And the school has said this is what it's. I think the latest one was the kids would go to school twice a week. So everything will be online, and now they're twice a week. This is a difficult one for the maintenance courts because I don't, can you, nobody can give us an indication as to when this is going to stop. When will the schools fully reopen and take our children in? And then, of course, with children being at home, like you mentioned, the cost of having them at home is exorbitant. And then on the flip side of that, the schools are not discounting school fees. School fees are still owed. When you're in those Model C schools and the private schools, those fees are still, you got to pay. And I noticed last year, a lot of clients came to me and said, I've been handed over. And then on top of that, you now have the Wi-Fi that's needed. And you obviously, if you're a working mom, as I am, you would obviously need additional assistance at home via a nanny or someone to, take care of the kids, watch over these children. But the maintenance court, so what I'm saying is practically, I get it. Listen, I'm a mom, I have 3 children. So I completely get it. But having said that, from a legal perspective, if we're going to take these things through to the maintenance court, they wouldn't be able to make a sufficient ruling based on the evidence in front of them, because we have to prove that this is the reasonable projected expenses of the child. And can anyone, I can't confirm for you that my daughter's going to need Wi-Fi 3 months from now. I bought her a laptop. I don't know if that was a good investment. I don't know if she's going to need it, and will she be back on site? If I can't give you that answer, the courts are not going to give you a ruling to facilitate that kind of expense, because we can't prove that long term that this is what's needed. So I think that's the biggest problem that the courts would be facing.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, and at the same time, a maintenance order is made, with the intention that it will resolve issues for the next few years, at least 5, 6, 7 years, or at least till the child turns 18 years old. Now, if we are calculating the maintenance amount based upon today, that the kids are at home, they're eating more, and so on, and then lockdown comes in a year's time, that order is obviously but inflated based upon the current facts. People might have to come back to the maintenance court. Ayesha, on that note, I might want to discuss this issue with you because you brought it up now regarding the schools. Many parents will actually now have disputes regarding what schools the minor child should go to for the sole reason, financial reasons. One parent might say, I've been retrenched, I'm not working anymore, I'm earning less money. The child must go to a different type of school, either up or down. It doesn't matter for this discussion. If the parties can't come to an agreement regarding that, what is your take on that? There's no law applicable regarding that. I'll give my take on it, and I don't apply my mind to it for a different matter, but I'll hear what you have to say if you don't mind.
Well, this is a difficult one. And I think I always start off telling clients, I think that's a difficult discussion, whether you're married or divorced. What school do my children go to? I think it's a very personal kind of question. And I don't think there's going to be any right answer. I would like to think that would be a decision made by the primary caregiver. But realistically, shouldn't that be something that the person who's responsible for the fees makes? I would think that would be probably the more viable option, because if you're paying the school fees, you need to be able to afford the school that your child goes to. Having said that, like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. And for this part, and I think for most parts, especially with maintenance and children, again, I take it down to, we can go, the courts aren't always going to give you the answer. Let me tell you, I had a matter in High Court. Well, it wasn't mine. I was there for another matter, and I heard a matter in High Court where the parties were disputing about the issue of which school does the child go to, and the judge said, I don't have the authority to make this kind of order. Like, what? Why are you asking me? I can't make this decision for you. Who decides where, which school these children should go to? This is something the parents need to jointly decide. And as co-parents, that's just one of the things you guys have to do. You have to push through it, whether it's through mediation or consultation or meeting halfway. It is just a decision the two of you have to make. And that's as far as I can see it. Unless you have a more creative solution for us, counsel, that's my take on it. You're just gonna have to decide and do it.
No, thank you for that, Aisha. Aisha, you answered that question extremely well. I get to grapple with that question. It's easy to decide on contact care issues, and those issues are simple because we deal with on a regular basis. All the time we deal with those issues. So our brains have developed a way of answering those questions. So I bumped into two senior family advocates in Cape Town yesterday and asked them the same question, and they also told me that's a difficult question to answer. Like, how do you determine what school the child should go to? They recommended, maybe get a educational psychologist on board, maybe to consult with the parents, or consult with the kids. But there are other variables involved as well. I mean, how far the school is from the child, what is the child's view on the issue, and so on. But it's an extremely difficult one, and it seems to me the law does, if the parties can't come to agreement, the bottom line is that they have to go to court. But there's no law that will actually assist before going to court. Yes, the court will have to make a decision ultimately, depending on the facts of the matter. But I think we need to look into that issue concerning what happens regarding schools if there is a dispute, because that is one law aspect of care and contact that's not really developed much. Aisha, that's my final comment on that, and before we can carry on to the next point. Okay, so let's move on regarding that. So Aisha, what does a person now do? Care and contact issues, the mother is refusing the father contact with the child, or alternatively, the mother is saying, it was lockdown, yes dad, you could not have contact for the first part of the holidays, but the second part of the holidays is my contact time. There is a court order in place. The court order doesn't talk about catch up contact.
Yes.
What is your view on that? I'll give my opinion after you.
The issue of, I think that's been, if I could describe 2020 in a paragraph, it would be care and contact. I must admit my maintenance wasn't, although I do a lot of maintenance matters, it wasn't so much maintenance. The issue of contact was much more controversial. I'm not sure about you, but for me, that's been, and coming into the first half of about the first month of 2021, contact has been a huge one. And it's really, I've got to, it's really saddened me when I've seen, parents, and I'm sad to say it, that it's been the primary caregiver, who's usually the mom, who's just been totally unreasonable about these things and just said, oh, well, it's not your week, it's not your month, and, I'm not going, I don't care. You weren't allowed to see the child. You missed out perhaps on certain holidays because of lockdown. You couldn't travel. For a long time, you couldn't travel between provinces. Do you know how many parents I have that exercise contact, between provinces? I think for most of last year, we couldn't travel. There was no interprovincial travel. So for that reason, and obviously to safeguard the child, a lot of these dads who were exercising contact, and I'm using it very loosely, the dads who were exercising contact couldn't. And so they've asked for a bit more contact, perhaps during the December holidays or during this period where maybe they can exercise better contact with their children. And I've had, the other parent just saying, no, sorry, do what you want. And from that, let me tell you what's happened. From that, I've had numerous urgent High Court applications in front of, at the Durban High Court, as well as the Pietermaritzburg. And let me say this, the courts have not looked favorably on a parent who's just blatantly denied the other parent access. Regardless of what the court order says or whatever is in place, I've had the court say, why are you denying the father access to their child? Taking into consideration that there was a lockdown, taking into consideration that perhaps you could have allowed the access and you didn't. In my experience, the courts have not looked favorably on someone who's just been malicious in denying access or have been unreasonable. So I think you've got to take it back to that. When we're dealing with children, you need to understand the courts are not unfamiliar. Well, I guess it depends which court you're in. But I would like to think that if you're in front of a judge or if you're at a family court, the courts are not unfamiliar with these kinds of tactics that are being used, these underhanded tactics of, using these children as pawns in a game. So they pick up on it very quickly. So if you are doing that and you are being unreasonable and you're just trying to be difficult, the court is going to see through it, unfortunately, and you're not going to get anywhere, because eventually the matter will be heard and the party that wants better access, they're going to get it. Because again, remember, and I always say this, let's look at it from a South African perspective. How many fathers do we have in this country who just don't care? They don't care, they're not involved in their children's lives, and that's the end of that. So obviously, if you have a parent who's coming forward and saying, I want to be a part of my child's life, I want to have, weekends, and I want to have weekday visits, and I want sleepover access. And there's nothing, when I say nothing, I mean, this man is not an abuser. He's not, he doesn't have any mental issues. He's, no drugs or alcohol. For all intents and purposes, he's a well-rounded, responsible father and person. The courts are not going to look favorably upon the parent who's just denying it out of malice and unreasonableness.
Thank you for that, Aisha. And if you look at the law, obviously the High Court or the Children's Court are upper guardians of minor kids. The orders are just there to regulate contact arrangements because the parties cannot come to some type of agreements. It is possible that the court can make an order stipulating that the mother will have primary care and the father reasonable contact, or as agreed to by the parties. That is fine. But if, say with the maintenance order, the amount of maintenance stipulated in the maintenance order is not the amount you should pay. You should pay what the child requires based upon your means and other parties' means. But we make an order because there's a dispute, the parties can't come to an agreement, and we have something in place. That is how the order works. If it comes about that last month the child cost more money, the father or the mother can approach the court and say, last month I incurred more money, the court can vary the order and change it. So that is fine. The same regarding care and contact. Your rights to your minor child is not based upon the order, it's based upon what's best for the kids, but the order is there to regulate and to avoid disputes. So, and we all know, Aisha, on that point, at the start of the lockdown, the minor child had to remain at the place of residence where the child was at the start of the lockdown. Many cases, the child was at the home of the non-primary caregiver. And then big problems happened. Urgent High Court applications took place where the non-primary caregiver made applications, tried to change the regulations, etc. And we've all seen that. But it's unfortunate when the non-primary caregiver loses contact and he wants to obtain more contact. Automatically the mindsets change and they're not in favor of fulfilling their rights. So that's very sad. So Aisha,
Yeah.
maybe we can go further to another question regarding the issue of third parties. Now, this is something that comes to my desk a lot, with third parties like aunts and uncles would want to have key and contact rights to the minor child because whatever reasons. What is your experience regarding those type of applications, especially during the lockdown?
Yes.
Have you experienced any of those type of? I'm seeing a bit of an increase regarding. I
I've
think.
done so. I've seen quite a bit insofar grandparents are concerned. And I've seen a lot of good judgments come out in terms of that, because of course it's, we have a constitutional right to family, I would say. So a family would include grandparents and, your immediate family, and provided, Shem, I've had actually some heart-wrenching ones. When grandparents come to me and they're crying for their grandchildren, that's a little bit of a sensitive one for me. I can't understand why anyone would just deny a grandparent to see their kids. Grandparents are known to be overtly loving and spoiling, these children. And obviously, the right to family is such an integral part of our law, and it's not watered down, not in my experience. And like I said, I've only really dealt with grandparents wanting contact with their children, and the courts have been favorable to that kind of contact. Again, and I'm going to say, and I'm using it very generally, I haven't had situations where I've had any allegations of abuse or anything like that against the grandparents. It was just the mom kind of saying, no, I don't want you to see my child, which is ludicrous. The child themselves have a right to family. They have a right to know where they came from, whether or not the parent approves of that fully or not. Yeah.
I think there's a difference between control, where the grandparents want to control the parents' lives and the grandchild's life, and as opposed to a situation where grandparents want to form part of the minor child's life. There's two different things.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I would avoid people to litigate on these issues, because if a court order gets made, and then you are stuck with a court
Mm.
order, so every Christmas or every Eid, and
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're limited to that. But if you're amicable and you say, grandparents, yes, you must have contact. Whenever you want to have contact, please contact me. We can arrange something to happen. I think that's very
Yes.
important. But it seems to me
Yes.
during this lockdown, and seems to me this case, because everybody's at home, people are acting differently. Gender-based violence is increasing. People are acting weirdly,
Correct.
and kids are being
People are
neglected,
doing crazy.
abused.
Yes.
Some kids are being abused, not but maybe like getting
Yes.
hiding and so on. And grandparents are sometimes the people that see it, because the minor children complain to them, and they are the
Yes.
ones who wants to change it or do something about it. So that's very interesting. Aisha,
Yes.
any observation on your side on other legal issues you want to bring about and we can discuss?
Yeah, there is one observation that I've noticed of late, and it just goes down. The reason that um, I feel, and I know you specialize in family, I as well specialize in family, and I can't emphasize the point enough, is if you're dealing with this area of law, no disrespect to any other practitioner, but try to get your counsel and your attorney who deal with this on a regular basis. And I'm going to justify why I'm making this kind of bold statement, is especially when you're dealing with issues of children and you're dealing with issues of maintenance, someone who deals with this on a regular basis would be able to give you a very practical solution to your problem, or be able to give you advice based on what the current trends are. And I say trends because the courts change. They change all the time, right? And so someone who's constantly in court and constantly bringing these matters to the forefront would be able to tell you, look, this is where our courts are sitting at right now. And having said that, I want to touch on the issue of maintenance and what I've seen in courts, and the biggest mistake that people have been making due to COVID. So sometimes, and a lot of people have had their salaries chopped, either because the company's closed or whatever the reasons are, but their salaries have been brought down. And I've noticed that a lot of individuals feel like, well, whatever my surplus is after paying everything, that is what my maintenance, well, that's what the amount of maintenance I should be paying. Now, here's my difficulty and my concern, and I would know this in counsel, this would be obvious to you, and the reason I'm raising it is because I've seen it in court so many times. The layman may not understand that that's not actually how maintenance is calculated. So you can't live in a 7-bedroom house, paying exorbitant amounts in bond repayments. You can't be driving the latest vehicles, and living the high life and traveling and shopping at Gap and all these branded stores, and then say, yeah, but now my salary got cut, so what's gonna take the fall is the maintenance. No, that's not actually how it works. And people, I think, get very surprised by that. They're like, what do you mean? Like, I've got to pay, I got to live. I've heard that so many times. I've got to live. No, so the court's not going to look at you and say, no problem, Shane, eat at Spa every second day and order McDonald's 3 or 4 times a week, but let's cut the maintenance down. That's not what's going to happen. And I think there's a lot of rude awakenings at courts where I see very angry, the respondents very upset and, flushed and, all angry. And, and I get these kinds of comments like, well, he's got to live. And I'm like, yeah, so does the child. The child also has to live. So when your salary's been, or if your salary's been affected by the lockdowns, by the regulations, and perhaps you've had a bit of a salary cut, you can't automatically go in and say, well, my salary's been cut, so can't do maintenance anymore. Sorry, we've got to look at your lifestyle holistically. We've got to look at the kind of car you're driving. We've got to look at the places that what do you do in your spare time? Are you, and nowadays everything is kind of, we swipe our cards for everything, right? So it's very easy to pick up a paper trail and be like, well, you were at Soviets, once a month, you're obviously doing shopping for thousands of rands at Soviets, but you're saying you can't afford maintenance, So that's been my biggest observation coming out of this lockdown, is people don't realize that and once your salary is cut, your entire lifestyle needs to be adjusted, not just your maintenance and the school your kids are going to. You can't be driving, an M4 or a coupe or whatever, and then say, well, I can't afford the school fees, so my child's got to go to a public school. it's going to have to be within, reason. Everything must be adjusted according to your salary if it's been cut.
Asha, thank you very much for that, and I'm certain our viewers benefit a lot from that because many people do not apply that specific principle. And I'm very concerned and concerned a lot that many parents take a very narcissistic view on child maintenance. It's like they can say they don't care about what's best for the child. They don't even care the child has food. Alternatively, no, the mother can pay. And I don't think that's a very humane way of living your life. You have a living child that needs to be fed, educated, etc. Yes, you and a mother or you and the father have certain issues, but why would the child be the one that loses out? You're using the child as a pawn. You would not even do that to your animals at home. Your animals at home will have all the best of food and veterinary services. But when it comes to your minor child, you are actually willing to be very economical and use clever tactics. And those are the worst type of people to litigate against. And they always lose, but they're the worst type of people because they believe it's okay. And Aisha, what happens a lot to me is the father pays a small amount of maintenance, let's say 1,000 rand, and it's quite a little amount of money, but he believes in the back of his brain that the mother uses that money for herself. And because she has a new haircut, she has a new pair of shoes, and the child lives off only on fresh air. They do not believe, they can't comprehend that the child actually eats.
Yeah, I see that exactly what you're saying. I see that all the time, where the dads feel like they're paying this maintenance to the mom. And that's such a big misconception. Listen, if she wanted maintenance, there's spousal maintenance, and that's a separate application altogether, and I think I've seen that that's become such a common misconception that I don't even realize that it's still a misconception. You know what I mean? I have to deal with it almost on every application. This has nothing to do with the mom. This is really about the child. And if the mom wanted maintenance for herself, well, then we would launch an application for her. This is purely about the child and the parent's responsibility towards maintaining that child.
Aisha, thank you for that. Aisha, tell me, going forward now, I mean, we discussed now for a nice half an hour on these issues. What do you think the way forward? I mean, your details are on the screen. You are quite relevant regarding family law matters. I've dealt with them on a regular basis, and you know your stuff, and you can clearly hear from that. Can clients contact you? Your email address, your telephone, your WhatsApp, your website?
Yes. Listen, I'm more than happy to assist, and I just want to say this off the cuff. I'm not the type of attorney that's going to encourage expensive litigation unless that's the only way forward. I'm very, very much for, like you've mentioned, I have 3 children of my own, and listen, just raising kids in general, whether you're married or divorced, is a challenge. And I always feel like the best thing to do is, get people around the table and get people talking, because we're dealing with people and we're dealing with children. So yes, viewers are welcome to contact me. I'm quite reachable on my cell phone. I'm quite easily accessible via WhatsApp as well, or email. Yeah.
And obviously, Aisha, your reach is broad. I mean, you litigate in various provinces, but Johannesburg and Durban, that's also
Correct.
fine. Okay, that's perfectly fine.
Yes, I have various masses: Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban. So I get around.
Now, the reason why I'm emphasizing upon this is that many practitioners are stopped practicing family law generally, or they have stopped, they close shop. And it's very important for viewers to know how can they get hold of these type of service, because the people watching these type of videos are watching for two reasons. One, either to obtain advice and information, alternatively to get somebody to assist them. So I'm very, very happy that you've mentioned that. Aisha, any final words before we end this video? Any to the viewers?
If I could just urge those that are listening, you obviously have some sort of dispute regarding your children right now. If I could urge you to try your best through, your attorneys, your legal practitioners, counsel, try to find middle ground, because like I think you and I have both emphasized today, is that the court process, there is no guarantee. And I love what you said just now, where you said, the court is going to make an order as best as they can to avoid disputes. So essentially, you're leaving the well-being of your child at the court's disposal, and that's crazy. Who wants to do that? As a parents, we should be in charge of our children. We should be the ones making the tough decisions. I find it ludicrous that parents would just to be like, let's go all the way and fight and let's let the court decide. This is not a business agreement. These are your children. Why would you let the court decide this, you know? So as best as you can, try to get around a table, put down all the facts. Even if you're going to file your affidavits back and forth, go for it. But at some point, sit down with your affidavit, their opposing affidavits. What are the disputes at hand? How can we reach some sort of middle ground? How can we decide what is best for our children, opposed to leaving it to a court to decide?
Now, Aisha, if I may add to that, thank you for that. I always tell this to clients, they draft the affidavits, they put the affidavits by attorneys, advocates, or themselves. The judge reads through that. He most probably takes an hour, let's say 2 hours to produce through that. The family advocate's office, they do an investigation, let's say they take 5 hours for that. So 7 hours is spent on your specific matter. It goes before the judge. You're expecting the judge to deal with your 4 children who are 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, your marriage that was for the last 10 years, and also going forward for the next 17 years in that 7 hours. You leave it to a third party that doesn't know your culture properly, doesn't know you, doesn't know your family, etc. The best thing to do is go to mediation, resolve the matter yourself. You guys take ownership of your lives and the way forward. But that's my last 2 cents. Any final words on your side regarding that?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Aisha, thank
No,
you.
I've said everything that I can possibly say. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. No, wonderful. It's always wonderful chatting to you, and have a wonderful day. I should have stay online quickly. Let me just cancel this video online, but I'll chat to you soon. And all the viewers, thank you very much.